Good evening. What's happening, y'all? Not gonna get any here anyway. Let's see what kept on. Let's try this one.
Meet Grammarly Go, your go-to solution for getting quality work done quickly.
Hey y'all, this is Ronte, and a little thing I love about the Chick-fil-A honey pepper pimento chicken sandwich is the richness.
I tend to focus more on the paintings and the drawings just because I think they're beautiful. This one's interesting. One of my followers pointed out that Chicago's located 88 degrees west of Greenwich. Everyone knows how much I love that number. Another very interesting correlation to that is that the Great Fire of Chicago was on October 10th or October 8th. I'm sorry. So 88, even though October's the 10th month, it was the original 8th month. This correlates with the Maui fires that started on August 8th, 88. You wouldn't believe how many great fires happened at the culmination of the dog days. So I did a video called Sirius Rising about the rising of Sirius, its correlation to what they called the dog days, the hottest days of the year in the northern latitudes, and all the things that come with that. And from an astrological correlation, but the amount of great fires that take place in that time frame, which is like a 28-day period, a moon cycle period, is pretty insane. I'd say a third of all the great fires in this time frame, the late 1700s through the early 1900s, many of them happened in this time frame. No correlation or no coincidence. I mean, again, more beautiful paintings. And as I've stated with many of these expositions, it's almost like they're robbing the old previous age, putting them on display, and then they disappear into generally private collections. Many of the really interesting stuff you hear me talk about on this show is not available for public consumption. And if it finds its way into a public museum, it's mislabeled and misinterpreted. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm going to be starting a series here soon on the Smithsonian. So stay tuned for that. Lots of really interesting correlations there. We'll talk about the history. We'll get into some subterranean world Hollow Earth stuff. Mr. Smithsonian himself was a big proponent of that. Just some pictures here. The fire. So here's the fire. Second day, the whole, I believe, was western end of the city across the river was destroyed. We're going to look at some bird's eye. This is the oldest one I could find. I believe this is the 1856 or 1863, one of the two. And you can see how dense.
New military device turns men into beasts. This $69 Special Forces device emulates 54,000 crunches in 20 minutes, allowing you to rapidly melt belly fat and get incredible abs up.
68. So yeah, this one was 62, I believe. Might have been 58 even, which is very old when it comes to bird's eye views. I mean, these people, these companies that were contracted for this, they sat in a blimp and drew these images. Very interesting. Some of them even took images and drew over the images, took photographs. The expansion of Chicago is very interesting. We're going to talk about Chicago again from a kind of theopathy perspective, what they said about Chicago, and correlate it with some of the older maps I have. Why that's important. I'll just scan through these and won't click on them. Peoria, Elgin, Kane. I mean, I've heard about this town, and I've been to Illinois twice. Just Chicago. I never went outside of Chicago, unfortunately, but I was quite surprised by some of these cities. Very large population in this time frame, 1880. Look at this guy right up here. I know it's hard to see, so I apologize for some of you, but this is the asylum. It's amazing how the largest building in almost every city in the 1800s is an insane asylum. How does that make any sense? I've talked a little bit in the past. The largest building in Oregon in the 1880s was the insane asylum. So same thing back that way. Aurora. Lots of interesting stuff on here on the main island. These islands that exist in the middle of the Mississippi, the Illinois River, the Ohio River, all are sacred and have very interesting constructions on them. Lincoln, Rock Island here. We're going to get into Rock Island. Rockford, very densely populated. Very surprising here. A large asylum here in Rockford, Illinois as well. El Paso, which was interesting to me. I thought this was a typo. No, that was in El Paso, Illinois. Moline, Rock Island County. Yeah, so that's it for the bird's eyes of cities. From here, I want to transition into a quick little theopathy article about Chicago and why it's important, at least from my own perspective in the shows. 62 people in here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me early. The winceness of the why. Theosophy's explanation of great life's problems, evolution considered in a cosmic and terrain view, a lecture which makes some startling allegations and which deals in immensity of time and thought. So if you aren't familiar with root races, that's something that maybe I'll do a show on. I've mentioned it many times, but it correlates nicely with kind of my whole working these ideas of singular races and pre-flood races and Atlanteans and so on and so forth. And although theosophy differs in ways, it correlates very nicely with kind of the pre-Babel stories and the antediluvians and giants and stuff like that. Each root race has an extreme extending. It has an age extending over vast periods of time, and each one of ourselves lived and evolved through all past races. We are our own ancestors and descendants. The discoverers and inventors of our time are the old Lemurians and Atlanteans, ourselves reincarnated and now picking up dropped threads of the past. Now, anyone familiar with my work hears me talk about Edgar Cayce all the time, and I can't recommend his work enough. I should have done a whole series in my Kentucky episode about Edgar Casey, his life, some of his early readings. Really powerful stuff. But once he gets into the Atlantis stuff, amazing the correlations between my material and what my own opinions are of Atlantis and what it represented, and his they overlap nicely. Witness and the White City of Chicago, which blends all styles and proportions of architecture in a conglomerate whole. That city was a partial and transient record of human history. Man lifted a corner of the veil of memory and caught a glimpse of his former greatness. Much as that revealed, it was but a dim prophecy of the mighty civilization whose foundations are now being laid in America. Now, theosophy, like if you can get some really kind of esoteric versions of their opinions, the less public versions of their opinions, they have a very strong overlap with what some of the early Oriental Masons thought of Atlantis, and that North America was actually Atlantis, and the idea of it being an island in the Atlantic was kind of a ruse. And they share a similar idea. In Bacon's book Utopia, although it's has some very much questionable kind of socialism, however you want to look at it, based material, class based material. The overlays with the utopia and building the new utopia of Atlantis, or the new Atlantis, as the book is titled, on the foundations of the old Atlantis. As we've stated so much across this entire continent, we stand on buried civilizations, one after the other. And they kind of understood this, that man resets in a way and reincarnates and experiences all these different forms of expression. But yeah, so um, without going too much farther here, I just wanted to kind of, in quotations, discuss why Chicago was called the White City and was considered a kind of remnant of Atlantis and Lemuria. Um, I've talked a lot about what I believe a more accurate representation of America would be, and since we're in Illinois, which is, you know, in my opinion, Lower Egypt, and they discussing the Nile as being the Mississippi, and we're working our way kind of towards Babylon, which would be Canada. I've mentioned this map before when I talked about my California episode of the Pygmies, but interesting map here. Um, you can see the four islands um, of the North Pole here, with Meru in the center. You got Tartaria labeled over here, Scythia, Scythians. But here's what I wanted to focus on. You have Canada labeled as the desert. You have the Pygmies here, kind of Oregon, California. And then you have Tangut, which is interesting again because we've talked about many maps showing North America called India Superior. And it has a lot of correlations there with kind of the quote Hindu race and what comes from that idea of the Brahmins and the overlays here with Atlantis and so forth. But I wanted to focus on right here in the Chicago Great Lakes region, which the Great Lakes are missing on many maps, and they don't seem to be here either. But you have the northern part of the Mississippi, which turns out obviously goes to the Missouri and the Illinois and the Ohio, Katai. Now, that's interesting because Columbus was looking for the white city when he was venturing to America, quote, America. And Cathay, right, being the Mississippi Valley, is an interesting overlay when we talk about Prester John, King David, the idea of the biblical lands being kind of set or misrepresented, and the setting being here in the North American continent is very interesting. But yeah, there are so many representations of this idea, and that Columbus again was looking for the white city. And when he landed in Cuba, he said, "I'm in Asia." And when you look at some of the people involved in that expedition, whether or not it actually happened or not, um, that's up to you to decide. But interesting overlays, right? He's looking for the white city, and he's in America, and he believes that he's found the continent that he's been looking for. But yeah, just wanted to show that correlation. Important. Chicago's a very interesting place, and the idea that again America's been on the older maps was often represented as not only Asia but India Superior, with central Mississippi Valley being the land of Kitai. And that's an important distinction to make, because when you look into old literature about Prester John and the kingdom of Kitai, it's exactly like I've been saying about Tolkien's Middle Earth is here in America. I did a video on that, saying ancient Tennessee was the inspiration for Tolkien's Middle Earth. There have been people that have made really cool maps of North America that correlate really interestingly with Tolkien's maps. And I talked about the giant wall of Mississippi, a continuation of the Great Wall of China, as they said in their own language, and how these walls exist all over America, and they, in many ways, look just like or resemble the concept of the Great Wall of China, and that they originally were called Great Highways before they found out that they extended 60 plus feet below the earth. But yeah, you know, Prester John lived in a world of magical beings, and outside the city gates were hobgoblins and dragons and all kinds of weird chimera and interesting kind of fantasy based creatures. And yeah, the correlations there are really important. But okay, yeah, I want to do a better job of kind of looking at chat and trying to see if there's anything that I can answer or reply on before I move on. We're going to go backwards into my Missouri article, um, because it's going to transition us from the mound systems of St. Louis into the mound systems of Illinois. You know, St. Louis was called Mound City, and before it was separated, even though up until a certain time there was East and West St. Louis, East St. Louis being on the Illinois side, West St. Louis being on the Missouri side. And that the mound complex was one whole conglomerate of mounds. And you'll remember, if you saw that episode, I talked about the underground tunnel that connected the St. Louis Mound City with the Illinois Mound City. And that's what we're going to go back and look at and kind of refresh everybody's uh, mind with, or at least reshare with those of you in here who haven't seen that episode. Hello from Wales, Vicky. Thanks for being here. Same with Aurora, still the old world downtown and nice in the most part. I remember that thick map. Yeah, Angel Mounds. Yeah, the thick map. Yep, the map that looks like a butt. Angel Mounds are still intact in my county and only preserved in this county. Yep. So we'll talk a little bit about preserving mounds. We'll talk a little bit about what happens to these mounds. We already know that not only for building St. Louis, but primarily for building the exposition, they tore and graded, quote, graded the mounds of St. Louis. And there's articles going back into the early 1800s where they were just stealing the stone out of the mounds to build the city of St. Louis and other things. That Great Wall of Mississippi I mentioned, they called it the quarry. And that for 30 years before they identified it as being a giant wall of a prehistoric race, they just called it the quarry, and they were stealing the stones and building. They even mentioned building the capital of Mississippi with the stones from the wall. So there's probably a whole generation going on of that wall being removed and the stone being used before people even bothered identifying it. Now, remember, in this region, mounds were so numerous that people just didn't give a shit. These mounds were destroyed and taken apart, and often the story goes that they're just rudely ornamented, rudely stacked pieces of stone, limestone, sandstone. Granted, very many of them were, but also many were perfectly truncated, cut stone pyramidal. Now we've talked about that they extended from 20 to 60 feet below current level of the earth. So when we talk about some of these numbers here, when we get into Cahokia, especially in Monk's Mound in the Illinois side, imagine how much larger these mounds actually are. They extend well below the surface level. And Cahokia is, from a square footage perspective, from tons of earth perspective, you know, um, measured from surface level is still gigantic. But imagine a third of the pyramid extend underground. Yeah, important to remember. So we're going to read this article here. We're not going to read the whole thing because it's a big one. I've already done a whole episode on it. I believe the episode is called "Is the Mississippi the True Nile?" And this is an excavation they made. Let's just show this image here again. When they were building this bridge, the St. Louis Bridge, I talked about this in, again, my Missouri episode. When they were building this bridge, when they were digging the pylons here, I believe they were 90 feet. I can't remember the exact number. 110 feet they had to go down to reach solid bedrock. Okay. When they were blasting with dynamite the bedrock to insert the footings, I had a better image. Let's get the better image because I think it will help everyone understand a little bit better. When they were inserting the dynamite into the bedrock to insert the footings, they blasted into a tunnel system.
Guys, I need you to be really cool.
When have we ever not been cool?
Vacation Friends 2 on Hulu. And there's more.
I want some more.
Add Disney Plus to Hulu for just $2 more a month.
So here you are. You can see some of these images here. Let's get rid of my face. We don't need that. Okay, so you can see here, this is what these footings look like, right? When they're completed. But imagine as they're digging down, the workmen are at the bottom here, and they would lay the dynamite, and they'd come up the shaft, and they'd blow the dynamite, so on and so forth. They'd have these crane systems that not only would put the footings in, but remove the debris on, so on and so on. When they were doing this, they blew into a subterranean tunnel system. And again, for those that remember this material already, this will just be a review. But for those of you that don't, this is very important to remember. About 4:30. Now remember, this is a year into building that bridge. About 4:30 yesterday, workmen engaged in blasting rocks in the bottom of the excavation for the foundation of this pier discharged an extraordinary large blast of powder when immediately after the report, a strange, again, the verbiage can be a bit rough in some of these, a strange phenomenon presented itself. Instead of having to wait the usual time for the smoke to clear away, they saw it ascend rapidly in a column as though issuing from the smokestack of one of our steamers. This soon cleared, and it was found that a steady, and you're just looking at me, so that doesn't help anything. I should pay a little more attention here. We need the article. Okay. And again, this is from 1869, 1 year into the construction. And we're over here. As soon as it cleared, it was found that a steady amount of air with a strange damp odor was issuing from the cavernous excavation, showing that an opening had been made into some unknown subterranean passage. Upon descending to the bottom, the usual mud and water had disappeared through a dark, deep opening in the rock about 10 feet in diameter, made by the last discharge of powder. Ropes, ladders, and torches were immediately procured, and careful explorations began. We cannot now enter into detailed description, but having been invited to accompany the Board of Engineers with the delegation from the Academy of Science and Historical Society, we must reserve a full exposition of this wonderful discovery until we shall have made a more careful survey. Suffice it for the present to say it is certain that it passes entirely under the river. Again, as I've been kind of correlating with these mounds over the years, or over this series, I apologize. We've been showing that many of these mounds were burial mounds, and in fact, many of the mounds in the American Southwest were actually giant buildings, and many of them connected by subterranean passageways and connected to cave systems going into the mountainside, so on and so forth. So, as they're saying here, they found their way into a tunnel, and it wholly passes under the river to the Illinois shore. Again, the Illinois shore would be the Cahokia Mound System, or what they called East St. Louis. So this tunnelway system connects with the St. Louis or Mound City, the western side, and goes under the Mississippi River. Again, remember, they're 110 feet below surface level, or a little bit more, because they had to use ladders and ropes to get down into the tunnel. And whether it wholly the work of some ancient race who once inhabited this land, whose interesting remains are strewn so thickly up and down the great valley, or whether it is partially natural and partially artificial, remains to be seen. In any case, it is nonetheless stupendous. The main passage we should judge to be about 20 feet high by 15 feet broad and systematically arched overhead, part of the way by cutting through solid rock and part by substantial masonry. The bottoms seem to be much worn, as if by carriage wheels of some sort. There are many lateral passages, which, of course, we had no time to enter. These are about 8 feet high and 6 feet wide. In the main passage, we saw no tools or implements of workmanship, but on entering one of the lateral passages, we soon emerged into a large chamber supported by leaning pillars of solid rock. When the chamber was excavated, around the walls of this chamber, there were what seemed to be niches closed with closely fitting slabs, and each slab covering with inscriptions in runic. Remember, runic, Punic, Etruscan, Phoenician, Iberian. The overlays here are endless, but you get the correlation here. These connect. Although we often talk about hieroglyphics, we can correlate the language from a phonetic standpoint nicely here. Bore a marvelous resemblance to those on the slab in the mercantile library, which was brought from the mines of Nineveh. Between the niche were projecting philisters and draped Abyssinian or Egyptian heads, which presented a most impressive and awe-inspiring effect as they were illuminated by the torches. I'm going to skip ahead because, like I said, I already did a video on this, but I want to correlate again the connection as we're crossing from St. Louis into Illinois. To those that have not seen the mounds around St. Louis, it may be necessary to say that the mound known as Big Mound is about 1 mile above the great bridge now being built. The mound known as Monk's Mound is on the other side of the river and is but one of a continuous chain of mounds extending from the river to the bluffs, a distance of 9 miles. It is conjectured that the tunnel under the river and the mounds are intimately connected, and that there was in ancient times an opening through the mounds from this subterranean highway. Right, as I've stated again, all the way from Alaska to the Mississippi Valley, these mounds and these pyramids have been buried by anywhere from 100 to 20 feet of earth, and that these pyramids extend. So now we're 110 to 120 feet below surface level of the river. And these tunnels are connecting again from the large mound in the quote Mound City or Western St. Louis, going under the Mississippi River into what they call Eastern St. Louis or the Cahokia Mound System. And they're saying that the mounds were all connected in ancient times through a subterranean highway. Of course, every scientific man is in perfect fever of excitement for these grand discoveries. Yeah. It goes on to describe more of what they found, and it just gets crazier and crazier. Another part I want to emphasize here is one of the magnificent groups. He is certain they brought a person who deciphered the runic inscriptions. And get this, he's a Sanskrit translator of Sanskrit. I've talked about the overlays between Sanskrit and the Etruscan language, and again, the Punic, Runic, Phoenician overlays are endless. But again, while we're talking about this region being known as Little Egypt, of the meaning of some of the words in the colossal sculptures, he already speaks very confidently. One of the magnificent groups he is certain is intended to represent Aharsis, again, I might be pronouncing that wrong, crowning Queen Elizabeth. Another group of colossal figures representing captives following the car of a victorious conqueror are the portraits of Luke of Deuteronomy and the friend going into captivity. So the Egyptians and the Hebrews entering captivity in these biblical stories found underground on these bas reliefs in runic. So when you look at this gentleman that they're talking about crowning Queen Elizabeth, again, the manipulation of timelines, and could these kind of Old Testament stories be much closer to our own timeline and be happening here in the American continent? Very interesting. When you look at this gentleman's name, you find the Hebrew form is believed to have derived from the old Persian name of Xerxes. Very interesting. So who are we dealing with here? Who are we dealing with? Who are these people under the Mississippi? And then from here, we're going to read the. So at the end of this article, they go on to say that it is very desirable that the savants in whose hands the rich treasure of Rock Island discovery has fallen will send representatives here so that we may compare notes. For it is possible that both of these wonders and those discovered here were the works of the same ancient people. Okay. So, right, we crossed the river. We are going to talk about Cahokia, which is where they said the tunnel systems connected with Monk's Mound, on, et cetera, and extending into the bluff. So this tunnel system, they estimated, goes on for 9 miles. So now we're going to read, which I never have done because I wanted to save it for this episode. We're going to read about the cavernous temple found under Rock Island, Illinois. And this is from 1869. Same year, okay? Same year. Looking through chat real quick, so I do a better job of that. Weird old abandoned town. There's a bush plant, the railroad exchange building. Yeah, the all the alcohol, all the beer factories correlate again with the kind of resetting of society and how alcohol played a huge role in that. The working class being fed this addiction. Yeah. McMack, welcome. Good to see you. Nothing really to read back through. Very large tunnels abound. We already knew. Shafts, drinking. Had to use magnesium to. Okay, so nothing to really go over. All right, so like I said, 1869. We're in Rock Island, Illinois. So we're way up the Mississippi here, towards the top of Illinois now. We have a cavern under Rock Island, 1869. We have the pleasure this evening of laying before our readers the result of one of the most thrilling and profoundly interesting subterraneous expeditions ever attended on this continent. It is nothing less than an underground passage under Rock Island. The present site of the United States Arsenal and the discovery of antiquarian relics of the rarest and most interesting character. Again, this is nothing new. The creation of these kind of these forts, these war forts, conversions of old star forts, what were supposedly built by the French, but even the French, they predate the French by a millennia or more. Who knows how long, to be honest. This is nothing new. The building of these kind of military installments on top of these subterranean networks. Cover this extensively in the American Southwest, and that I did a video that deep underground bases are actually um, kind of the military takeover of the underground uh, systems that predate the founding of America, and who knows even how long, hundreds and hundreds of years. So, the United States Arsenal, the discovery of antiquarian relics of the rarest and most interesting character. The entrance to a large cave, as our home readers are doubtless aware, is plainly visible from the ferry landing, as well as other portions of our city bordering on the river bank. And although some 10 feet in diameter at the entrance, it gradually diminishes in size until some 25 feet are reached. When it is with difficulty that a person can effect an entrance by crawling through the aperture, but when once fairly through, there is no difficulty in standing erect. Until the recent interesting discoveries were made by the enterprising explorers representing the scientific society who are now sojourning in our city, this cave has never been known to be over 120 feet in depth, and has possessed nothing more than ordinary interest, except as having been thought by this stern old Sac warrior Black Hawk to have been the chosen abode of the Great Spirit that presided over their destinies. But upon close examination, at the terminus of one of the darkest and most intricate recesses, a narrow cavity was discovered in the rock, and by the aid of a torch forced into it, an interior apartment was found, upon entering which the party were enabled to explore the subterranean passage for a distance of nearly 1,000 feet. The main passage is some 6 feet in width and about 9 in height, and is evidently a natural cavern, though in several places there are evidences of it having been widened, as chisel marks can be distinctly discovered on the walls, besides numerous small recesses at regular intervals of 50 feet, which bear traces of having been hewn out of massive solid rock. The second corridor leading from the main one is very extensive, containing 6 ponderous pillars enwreathed with gorgeous decorations. Beyond this is a shorter entrance, in which is the entrance to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and which contains one of the grandest collections of antiquarian curiosities ever discovered on this continent. It contains a huge pedestal in the center, constructed of solid copper, upon which is erected a magnificent shrine, which, with its unique inscription, denotes the antiquity of its devotees. Surrounding it are the colossal figures of the 12 worshippers in kneeling posture, and quite contiguous to them is the symmetrical, though diminutive, figure of an Indian maiden with a countenance of surprising beauty and strongly marked features, indicative of deep thought and wondering surprise, pointing with one hand to the expressive word engraven on the wall, Sheol, indicating thereby that the end of their race is at hand. Above them all, on its projecting and crescent-shaped roof, are arranged in systematic precision crossbows, arrows, and other weapons in warlike profusion, reminding one of the ancient sons of Persia and Greece. The atmosphere in this apartment is almost unfit to sustain animal life, being damp, heavy, and very impure. The torches of the exploring party were several times extinguished, and the persons having the expedition in charge barely escaped suffocation. Immediately adjoining the room containing these wonders is an obelisk of solid brass, some 7 feet in height, beautifully sculptured on 4 sides. There are in all 21 small bas reliefs, and above, below, and between them is carved an inscription, 76 lines in length. The whole is in the best state of preservation. Scarcely a character of the inscription is wanting, and the figures are as sharp and well defined as if executed only a few days ago. One of the scenes represented is a circle of the ancient Aborigines sitting in a council with the all potent pipe of peace performing its wonted circuit, while the fortunes of war and peace are being discussed in the presence of the white winged presiding genius. Another scene represented a royal chieftain, followed by his attendants. A prisoner is at his feet, while men are being introduced, leading various animals and carrying ponderous crossbows, javelins, and other weapons. The animals represented are the elephant, the polar bear, lion, stag, and various kinds of monkeys. The ornaments delicately graven on the robes of the party, the tassels and fringes, the bracelets and armlets, the elaborate curls of the hair and beard are all entire. One of the chiefs stands very erect and carries in his arms an animal resembling a camois upon his right arm, and in his left hand a branch bearing fine flowers. Around his temples are a fillet adorned in front with a rosette. One of the other characters is a tragical attitude, holds a square vessel resembling a basket in his left hand, and a drawn dagger in his right, while on his head is a worn and rounded cap, at the base of which is a horn. The garments of both consist of a robe falling from the shoulders to the ankle, and a short tunic underneath, descending to the knee, and are richly and tastefully decorated and embroidered with fringes, whilst the hair is arranged with study and taste, the limbs delineated with peculiar accuracy, and the bones somewhat faithfully, though somewhat too strongly marked. After proceeding further, the party reached a large room with a high arched roof, in which were the entrances to many chambers. This contained the crowning gem of the wonders. Nothing less than a huge sarcophagus of copper, 9 feet long and 3 feet in width, minutely sculptured within and without, with several hundred figures, representing an immense funeral procession and ceremonies relating to the deceased chieftain, with emblems and other devices. The lid was partially removed and revealed a quantity of bones and javelins. In one of the secluded corners of this apartment, and a few feet below the level of the floor, is the arched entrance to an unexplored chamber, approached by a narrow passageway down through a hideous stone stairway. The party, after repeated efforts to effect an entrance, were obliged to abandon it. In plainly defined Indian characters, it bears the significant inscription, "All hope abandon, ye who enter in." An admonition which, while it extended to excite and increase the curiosity of the explorers, was wisely heeded. The knowledge of this ancient and interesting race does not seem by any means to have been confined to statuary and sculpture. Their weapons and the jewel ornaments with which their persons were adorned, though principally of copper, are in some instances finished with gold and silver, carved in the most exquisite manner conceivable, indicating mechanical genius and scientific attainments of the highest order. The luxury of an enlightened civilization are clearly delineated in these mysterious images and devices, rather than the wretchedness, ignorance, and superstition of a semi-barbarous race, as eminent authors of the present age have surmised our country, previous to the discovery of Columbus, to have been inhabited by. Gosh, what an amazing discovery, and what a great paragraph that was. At present, the strictest vigilance is observed at the cave, no persons being allowed to enter it without permission from one or more of the explorers, who are all, at present, the favored guest of the Rodman House. We congratulate the exploring party and the scientific association they represent for having, in defiance of the perils of the adventure and the ruthless ravages of time, brought to light these monuments of ancient grandeur and magnificence, and our gratitude at being furnished for publication the details of researches so thrilling and astounding in their character is only equaled by the absorbing interest which we feel confident our readers will experience in their per usual. During the interval of proceeding further with their investigations, we understand it to be the intention of the party having the relics in their possession to ship the movable portion of them at once to New York, if permission from the War Department for the removal can be obtained. So, yeah, amazing article. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Man, incredible, incredible. And as it stated, this exploring party is from Europe. They don't go too far into the details as to where they're from, um, but they remove all the relics they can. They ship them to New York, and I'm sure they find their way to Europe. Um, and after countless hours exploring further, there is nothing more described of Rock Island and this cave structure. It remains kind of a myth, but you find no other details about what else they found. I'm sure that later on they were able to remove the blockage and with more labor found their way into further subterranean chambers below Rock Island. But yeah, again, correlating this with the subterranean, quote, Egyptian, Assyrian um, relics of the subterranean tunnel system found below the Mississippi connecting East and West St. Louis. And again, the man translating the quote Punic writings, Sanskrit translator, and talking about that the story is of the Israelites being led into bondage and Deuteronomy, the story of Deuteronomy, and the idea that it shows Xerxes crowning Queen Elizabeth. These are things that are crazy and from our current historical narrative make absolutely no sense, but I think we need to rewrite the ideas of histories and timelines especially. So yeah, um, we're going to get into Wayne Herschel. So if some of you are familiar with his work, amazing. The Hidden Records, thehiddenrecords.com. But first, we're going to read some material on Cahokia, right? Remember the subterranean passageway led under the Mississippi into what they called Eastern Mississippi, which translates further into the Cahokia Mound systems as well as Monk's Mound. And we're going to talk about the correlations of the Pleiades and the astronomical charts that exist with these mound systems. I've been stating this for a long time that many of these mound complexes, although from an aerial perspective seem very irregular, are actually correlating with astronomical events. We're going to talk a little bit more about the destruction of mounds and quote the needs of industry. Railroads, factories, expositions, you name it. All of these quote these major cities we inhabit today are built on ancient cities of old. Railroads, huge factories. They're often going in the middle of mounds or over the top of them. So here we are, the Evening World, Monday, October 2nd, 1922. I hope everyone's enjoying the articles, enjoying this episode. And we're going to dive more into, again, these pyramids. We got about an hour left. We got a lot of material here. So we'll talk about pyramids being leveled for factories. We'll get into... No, probably skip that. We can skip that. Yeah. We're going to talk about dragons. We're going to talk about giants. We're going to talk about some interesting skeletons found in these mound systems that defy logic. We'll talk about mineral wealth. Okay. Let's get back to it. Will secrets of prehistoric Americans be revealed at last by excavation of the mound so huge that it rivals pyramids? The monks. So this mound was called Monk's Mound. In the 1700s, when the French explored this area, they found Trappist monks inhabiting these mound systems. Now, explain to me why we have Buddhist monks. They not only were living on top of these mounds, but they were growing wheat on the top of the mounds. And they talked about how the region was an agricultural wealth, and that they felt an energetic presence in these mound systems. Interesting, no? And we've talked about the Buddhist correlations with all of the old representations of Buddha found throughout the Mississippi Valley as well. Interesting correlation that in the first, written records of explorations in this region, at least from translated into English, the mound systems occupied by Trappist monks. Monks, the largest of Cahokia mounds near East St. Louis. Again, remember, East St. Louis, Illinois, is just across the bridge from what we called Mound City or St. Louis today. Covering more than 17 acres and built by an extinct race that antedates Indians. That's an important fact that goes uncorrelated. Even the quote Native Americans or Indians that inhabited this region, even in the 1700s, and then you had monks living on this mound. They were covered in trees and buried in dozens of feet of earth. Dr. Warren K. Moorhead, anthropologist, he wrote a book about this. If you want to dive into Cahokia further, you just search Moorhead, Cahokia. May trace origin of human life on this continent. The pyramids of Cheops in the Egyptian desert on the other side of the earth long have been basking in their glory. Let's zoom in a little bit here. As one of the 7 wonders of the world, but it has been a false glory, for in the United States, very close to the entire population of this country, stands a monument which is far greater than the stone pile near Cairo. Incidentally, the rightful claimant to a place among the world's 7 marvels also stands near Cairo. Only it is Cairo, Illinois. It is the monks, one of the Cahokia mounds on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River facing St. Louis. Now, again, just keep in mind that article I read at the beginning about how the subterranean highway connects all of these mounds. Now, in that article, I didn't read the whole thing because, again, I've already done a video on it. In that article, they discuss when they were excavating Monk's Mound that they kept breaking into subterranean chambers, connecting these highways again. And they said that this highway, in their mind, extended all the way into the bluffs. Now, I've correlated that there were tunnel systems all throughout the Ozarks, and I believe the Appalachian Range is completely crisscrossed with these tunnels as well, and that many of these ancient peoples were living underground, and that these pyramids, like many of the pyramids in Mexico, they found subterranean tunnels under a lot of the pyramids in Mexico, as well as the quote Egyptian labyrinths that are found all under the pyramids in Egypt. But I just love how this guy starts out right in this article, right? Has been falsely attributed. The monks has not the startling presence of the pyramids. It looks like a hill stuck with many other on the fertile plains of the Mississippi Basin. And the casual, now, if we go back to Anomalous America, Texas, they excavate one of these truncated pyramids just like this and find it to be made of crazy cut stone. And they said they could see saw marks on the stone. And that on the top of this pyramid, and it was perfect cut stone. So often these mounds are left covered like this, and they think they're just mounds of earth, but they're often huge stone constructions. And on the top of these flat levels, they found petrified wood. So they create this huge floor, essentially. It looks like a hill stuck, yep. And casual passerby never gives it another thought. Yeah, because again, some event happened here and these things were covered in 10, 20, 30, 100 feet of earth in some instances. Again, Monk's Mound extends at least 30 feet below surface level When they were excavating it and breaking into the subterranean chambers, I believe they were somewhere between 30 and 40 feet below surface level. It stood up bold and brazen above the insipid stretches of sand. It would startle attention. Tourists by the tens of thousands would rush to see the village sites and burial places of probably the original inhabitants of this country and the United States, would probably long since have made it a natural park. As it is, there are even now a large number who come from remote states and even foreign lands to look at the Cahokia Mounds. But a rather deal government has refused to purchase the 1,000 acres of the fair's famous American bottoms, on which there are some 80 hills, and to set them aside a state park as a monument to those who really owned the land upon which we live. Again, you find these mounds are excavated, all of the relics are taken away, and once there's nothing left to be discovered, they make it a park, and you'll never excavate these mounds. Again, if many of these mounds were just uncovered, you'd find that they're all stone pyramids. Again, some more crude than others, but some far more advanced than we're told. So here we are in 1922, and even though this is the largest mound complex in North America, they're not interested in making it a park. Of course, I mean, that article, they were excavating under the mounds in 1869. So how many years is that? We're 50 plus 53 years removed from that, and they still aren't interested in protecting it. So you can only imagine the kind of labor and what's been going on below ground as they excavated all of these things. Same thing was happening in the American Southwest. They just robbed all the relics, and they took their time exploring the underground, and then when they were confident there was nothing left else, they made it a national park. So it goes on to say that they're trying to convince them to make it a park. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of move around. Two theories now predominate as the probable reason for this great tumulus. That was the older word for mound. One is that it was primarily a burial place, and the other that it was built for some great public meeting place, a temple or a council hall. Early investigators say the monks rose in 4 terraces or platforms from the plain, establishing a certain kinship with the pyramids. Yeah, they were terraced stone, and the smooth earthen look that they obtain now, where they look just kind of like a hill, is due to something happened and buried these. It was found that monks was in the shape of a parallelogram with straight sides. A projecting portion on the south led to a terrace or apron containing 2 acres of ground 30 feet above the base. Blah 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 blah. Just what the significance of the terraces is still distinguishable. Really, Dr. Moore hopes to find out in the future explorations. He has already learned that when the Cahokias died, they placed tools and food at the side of the dead bodies. Again, this is a civilization that came after their construction, without a doubt. They find these bodies buried on top of these structures. These people came to this area, migrated to this area after some kind of event, and inhabited this region. Again, we find the same story again through every one of my episodes, that all of the cities, that not all, but many of the big cities we inhabit today are just reconstruction. We built our foundations on the shoulders and foundations of a previous race. And that's what was happening here. These people were just burying their dead or the chiefs on top of these mounds, and they had no idea how they got there, who built them. This is a big one I want to read. Prehistoric mounds leveled to provide factory sites. Now, again, many of the exhibitions that have taken place on the Mississippi have been built on mound complexes, and many sites of cities were occupied as giant mound complexes. I believe this one was from the same time frame as the previous 19. I think it was either 1918 or 1920, something around there. In an attempt to answer the century-old riddle of the origin of 60 or more earth mounds in Cahokia District in Madison County, Illinois, across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Warren K. Moorhead, same gentleman, professor of archaeology at Phillips Andover Academy, recently completed excavations in one of the larger of the mounds, says a writer in the Christian Science Monitor. That's too far. There we go. His explorations were financed by Eastern museums and schools and private individuals. Why is that always the case? And we're not talking Eastern like New York or Boston. We're talking Europe. Again, this is what was happening. We had the Duke or the King of Sweden. I can't remember exactly if it was Colorado or New Mexico, who was arrested for stealing relics. The Europeans were over here, and they were grave robbing for 50 years before anyone was doing anything about it. Even the governor of Colorado was pleading with the federal government to protect his ruins and relics because the Smithsonian and Eastern museums, quote, Eastern museums, were freely stealing mummies, tearing down buildings, and stealing relics, and he could do nothing about it. Europe, that's not what Eastern means. Yeah, I'm aware of it doesn't, that's not what it means. But if you've seen enough of my material, I quote the quote Eastern idea is relative to European involvement in the excavation of many of these mounds, American Southwest as well. Digging a secondary purpose, the stimulation of interest in the mounds in an attempt to obtain legislation for their inclusion in a state park. Otherwise, they would fall before the invasion of the East St. Louis Industrial District, as did similar mounds in St. Louis. Again, Mound City of St. Louis, as we know it, was completely destroyed. They were all excavated. Only a few months ago, an industrial corporation obtained an option on the site of Monk's Mound, the largest in the group, for a manufacturing plant, but the deal fell through. The mounds are, and according to Mr. Moorhead, the greatest prehistoric monument in America. The mounds are to America what Stonehenge is to England, continued Mr. Moorhead. The Englishman was deaf to the warning that Stonehenge was about to be destroyed under P.T. Barnum's announcement that he was going to buy it and carry it off to New York. If I were to announce that I was going to load Cahokia on a flat car and take it to Boston Common, then Cahokia might be saved. Proof conclusive of the artificiality of the mounds was established early by the excavations, which revealed 3 hard-burned platforms in the mound explored. It was apparent that the work of piling up the mound stopped at one period, and the top was burned over with a fire of sufficient intensity to fuse and bake the earth to a thickness of several inches. Now we find correlations again with the American Southwest, where they talked about many of those ancient buildings being burnt. And we're not talking like burnt like clay, like burnt by some crazy event. I wouldn't even go as far as to say as it was volcanic, although it definitely could have been. Um, I lean more towards plasma, and we're going to get into a petrified forest that extends for many miles along this area, kind of strengthening what I've been showing through Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, where we're dealing with some kind of an electrical event that petrified hundreds of square miles instantly, with fruit still clinging to the branches of some of these trees. Look back at my Anomalous America Oregon episode. In southeastern Oregon, they find a petrified forest with leaves and fruit still attached to the trees, and it was 30 square miles, at least 30 to 50 square miles. Several inches. Mr. Moorhead's interpretation of these plateaux is that they were ceremonial or dance floors. This correlates again with the stone cut pyramid of Texas, that when they removed all of the earth that was over 13 inches deep covering the pyramid, they called it a mound, and then they were like, this is a pyramid, it's not a mound, once they removed all the earth. And they found the petrified, quote, dance floor that was the top of this pyramidal structure. Floors used in religious rites. Corroboration of this theory, he pointed out, was the existence of one of the floors of a depression or basin of half-baked clay, such as frequently has been found elsewhere in the valley and established as sacrificial altars. Prehistoric seat of culture. Another important discovery was the finding of a bit of pottery and of higher grade in the ceramic art than the common run unearthed. This bit had a perceptible glaze and a distinct design, a circle within which slight tracings cross at right angles. This indicates, said Mr. Moorhead, that Cahokia was the seat of culture of the mound builders who erected their monuments throughout the Mississippi Valley. The prehistoric peoples are judged by their ceramic art. No other mound builders had progressed to the art of glazing. Now, this ties nicely again with the quote Greek pottery that they were finding in not only New Mexico, Arizona, but also Alaska. And they called it the most advanced pottery that exists on the American continent, and related it to Grecian pottery. Again, this correlates with Etruscan. When you study Grecian pottery, it's all Etruscan. It comes from Etruria, and again, I've been correlating the Etruria Punic phonetic correlation, and that the quote Aztecs were Etruria or Etruscan half breeds. This ties back into Atlantis and all of these things as well. But yeah, this advanced pottery. The deeper you go, the more advanced the pottery gets, just like the constructions. But I'm going to hop ahead here to mounds being destroyed. The last to go, according to Henry Welpley, chairman of the Committee of Archaeology of the Missouri Historical Society, was the mound at the intersection of Mound Street and Broadway in 1869. Speculation about the origin of the mounds was even greater then than now. The St. Louis Academy of Science thinking to throw light on whether the mounds were natural or man-made. Again, it's just crazy that they think these things were natural. You know, as we said, these explorations into these mounds had been going on for quite some time, and hence determine whether efforts should be made to save the last of them. Brought a geologist to St. Louis to examine it. In the records of the Academy, there is an entry which declares that the geologist proved conclusively that the mound was natural. To be thought and sure, the Academy employed another geologist, and the entry on his report is that he too authoritatively stated that the mound was not the work of man, but nature.
How much you get paid?
Now, they go on to state that they had these people falsifying these claims because people like the Santa Fe Railroad had trouble permitting buying mounds that were man-made. So if it was natural, if it was a natural hill, it was much easier to get their constructions permitted. You know, and all you had to do was pay the right person to say that the mound that's obviously not not natural was man-made, or that it was not man-made. My apologies, and that it was natural, and you could just plow the thing flat and run off with all the relics and build your railroad. All right, kind of want to change courses here, but since I mentioned petrifactions, I want to read that article really quick. Antiquities. All right, here we go. This is from 1830, an old one. The Mineral Wealth of the West. In a late Western journal, we find some interesting remarks on the mineral regions of Ohio and Illinois, and an account of a petrified forest, as described by Judge Hall in the Illinois Magazine. The mineral region of Illinois is said to be unrivaled. It is, as yet, but partially developed. Chemistry, mineralogy, and geology will yet unfold its treasures. The rich turf which yet covers its prairies has scarcely been broken. Yeah, the rich turf. Again, this kind of alluvial layer of whether it was a flood or, you know, who knows what it was. But the fact that regions here had been covered by anywhere from a foot to 100 feet of alluvial turf has scarcely been broken except for the purposes of agriculture. And remember, a lot of these farmers were running into all kinds of stuff, even just a foot below the surface. Giants, tombs, stone implements, all kinds of crazy stuff. And the treasures which lie beneath it at present are useless. It is believed that the mineral region will supply lead enough for the use of both Europe and America. Copper and coal have been frequently discovered, and silver ore has been found in the southern part of the state. Medicinal springs have also been found, strongly impregnated with sulfate of magnesia and other mineral properties. Now, the only radium ever discovered in Illinois was found in the mineral springs. Go figure. Keronite, or the ore in which the highest quantity of radium is discovered, was never found in its ore. But of course, the rich mineral spring waters of Illinois flowed with radium, these quote healing springs. One of the most curious mineral discoveries of the present day is the petrified forest on the Missouri River. A letter to the editor of the Illinois magazine states that the petrifactions of stumps and limbs of trees are abundant for the distance of 30 miles over an open prairie on the western bank of the Missouri. The topography of this section of the country is hilly and much broken into deep ravines and hollows. On the sides and summits of the hills, at an elevation of several hundred feet above the level of the river, and at an estimated height of some 1,000 feet above the ocean, the earth's surface is literally covered with stumps, limbs, and roots of petrified trees, representing the appearance of a petrified forest. Broken and thrown down by some powerful convulsion of nature, and scattered in all directions in innumerable fragments. Some of the trees appeared to have been broken off in falling close to their roots, while others stand at an elevation of several feet above the surface. Some of the stumps, when measured, proved to be upwards of 15 feet in circumference. As these formations are supposed to be produced by the agency of water, of mineral substance, it is natural to conjecture that this region has at some day been submerged in water. But when? Are they antediluvian remains? Or was this region covered at a period subsequent to the general deluge? They must have proceeded from such causes, unless it is granted that petrifactions may be produced by the simple action of the atmosphere. These are interesting topics of inquiry. A petrified forest, a vast wilderness changed to stone. Was it the gradual work of ages? And did the hand of the gray-headed time deposit the stony particles in the grains of the wood, sand by sand? Or was it rather an instantaneous transformation from vegetable life to mineral death, like the sudden change of Lot's wife into a pillar of salt? Did the great process of petrifaction commence at the day when Noah's vessel of old was tossed in the boundless and overwhelming waters of the deluge, or not till ages afterwards, after some great inundation in the prairies of the West? Has there ever taken place in those extensive regions some mighty, unrevealed flood, laying waste to the fair hunting grounds of the wandering aboriginal, sweeping away his cabin on the hill, compelling him to trust his life to his my apologies, to his canoe, destroying the buffalo and the mammoth, uprooting forests and tearing them limb from limb, and plunging all nature into chaos? Could these things be? And if so, may not all wise providence direct their recurrence? A beautiful object must be that petrified forest, either when the midday sunshine sets its diamond particles in a blaze, or when the twilight colors it with a rosy flush, or the moonlight endues it with a marble like whiteness. You might fancy yourself in Aladdin's gardens, but the trees themselves, as well as the fruit, are like diamonds and precious stones. You might fancy yourself in a winter forest of New England, whose massy branches and trunks are heavily encrusted with ice and sparkling snow. You might fancy yourself among the sparry grottos of fairyland, but there is little need for the exercise of fancy when it can hardly surpass the simple and substantial fact. What a scene for the pen of Byron or a Scott, a vast forest with its inhabitants, savage man, beast, and bird, at a moment transformed and petrified, animated nature changed into inanimate matter, life to silent and unchanging death, silent. I just love that article. You know how I feel about the plasma petrifactions, even this article, from the 1830s describing, did this happen slowly over time? Was it submerged under the waters of a deluge? Or did this happen in an instant? Like Saul's wife turned to a pillar of salt. Well, we've covered enough petrified forests over all of these episodes now to say that these markers exist everywhere and that they find petrified people, they find petrified skeletons in these forests, they find petrified fruits. You'll remember in Colorado they found petrified coconuts, huge coconuts, 3 or 4 times larger than a normal coconut. I mean, what's a coconut doing in Colorado anyway, right? This goes back to the idea that before this petrifaction, we're dealing with a kind of tropical climate, all the way from Alaska, which had a tropical climate before this kind of tundra snow climate. Alaska was all tropical everywhere. And petrifactions and petrified trees are found all over Alaska, all the way to here we are now in Illinois. And, these people were postulating things that we are talking about today. What caused these huge petrifaction events? And when trees petrify, they turn into all these different minerals. And they were one of the first things that mining companies ever took down. That's why the only one that you can really explore, to my knowledge, openly is the one in um, Goody Mayo. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Um, oh, Old World Floor in the house. Longo, love you. The petrifaction thing is really important. Since Goody Mail's in the channel, the Calavera skull, which I talked about in my California episode, all these giant skeletons that are found 10 feet to 500 feet below the surface. They found massive stone cities in California buried under 400 feet of lava flow. And so history is far more revealing the deeper we dig, you know. So yeah, I hopped to a petrifaction because I mentioned in the previous article, and I want to go. We'll move away from Cahokia. I want to talk a little bit about Wayne Herschel, and Dr. Longo hopped in here, and if he's still in here, this will be something that he relates to. He talks about star maps and the star map found in Florida. But again, if you aren't familiar with Wayne Herschel, he has a YouTube channel. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says, but his correlations to ancient constructions and star maps is amazing. And so check out his YouTube channel, check out his website again, hiddenrecords.com. But his work on Cahokia is really amazing, and it ties in with the 7 hills of Rome, the 7 hills of Cincinnati, and this kind of idea of the overlays of these star systems and these 7 hills cities correlating with the Pleiades. And yeah, the star map he makes for Monk's Mound and the Cahokia site, as well as St. Louis, Mound City, is really amazing. And he has these for areas all over America and all over the world. But, I could spend 2 hours just reading this site here. But he does a really cool breakdown between the mounds and the Pleiades star system. But yeah, really amazing here. Shows the old flow of the Mississippi, which again we've talked about and how rapidly that changed, and the correlation between the star systems.
Use Priceline. They have package deals no one else has.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
These overlays are really nice, though. That some of these mounds look like human faces. which isn't hard to believe considering they had built other complexes. He shows the same correlation between the layout of the pyramids of Tikal, mounds of the Cahokia, with the make of what you will about the photos of Mars. But yeah, really amazing stuff.
What did he say? I wonder.
Some of the relics of Cahokia, showing again what I've been discussing here: the Egyptian, Assyrian, Mayan, Cahokia, the over petrifactions and petrified trees are found all over Alaska. Website again, hidden. He says, but his correlations to ancient construction. But yeah, really amazing here. Shows the old flow of the Mississippi, which again we've talked about and how rapidly that changed. And the correlation between the star systems. These overlays are really nice, though. That some of these mounds look like human faces, which isn't hard to believe considering they had built other complexes. He shows the same correlation between the layout of the pyramids of Tikal, mounds of the Cahokia, with the make of what you will about the photos of Mars. But yeah, really amazing stuff. Some of the relics of Cahokia, showing again what I've been discussing here: the Egyptian, Assyrian, Mayan, Cahokia, the overlays between the previous cultures and what's found underground here. The star map, the Pleiades found on some of the vessels removed from the area. People have seen this image. I posted this quite a lot over the years. The star maps and the Sayu teepee. Gorget found from Cahokia. But anyways, I'll have this posted in the dialogue box for the video, so you can just click on it from there. But I check out his YouTube channel, and he has these from all over the place. And this correlates again with what I was saying about these worldwide culture and how the star maps correlate, as well as the language and many other things. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of just do a quick little glance, because again, I could just do a 2-hour episode on this one thing on Cahokia. But the star map stuff is really, really interesting. I said, check out Wayne Herschel, The Hidden Records on YouTube, Flower Jones. His website, thehiddenrecords.com, but he has a YouTube channel where he does a lot of really great 5-minute to an hour and a half episodes on all kinds of hidden mysteries and correlations between the heavens and these earthen structures, as above so below type of relationship that exists between them. Okay, we're getting low on time, and I probably have just enough time. No, let's do a quick little. We talked about we correlated some things, so I want to read these really quick. Wanted to read these really quick from the 1890s. Aztec ruins in Illinois. A well-built stone roadway found by workmen making excavations. Evidences of the occupancy of the Illinois River Valley by an ancient race of some culture were uncovered at Marseilles, 8 miles east of Ottawa this morning. While workmen were excavating for new gates just above the Marseilles Dam, they discovered what appeared to be a stone roadway. Further excavations disclosed some 50 feet of a well-made roadway of slabs of stone, each stone being some 12 feet long, 1 to 3 feet wide, and over 2 inches in thickness, with a break here and there filled with cobblestones, which were also laid in regular courses. The road, it is thought, was built by the Aztecs or the Tezcunoans, who were driven from this region by the Indians. Now, what's really interesting here is that this correlates again with the, quote, ancient wall of Texas, as well as the one in Mississippi, that perhaps we're not just dealing with a roadway, but many of these walls, I believe, were roadways, like the Great Wall of China is a roadway as well as a wall. Aztec relics in Illinois. Captain E.P. Ford, an enthusiastic student of history and habits of the ancient mound builders, and who has unearthed many valuable specimens of skulls, implements, etc., belonging to this little-known people, has shown us what is evidently an ancient idol taken from a mound in the neighborhood of Piazza. It is a representation of a human head, and in general contour is undoubtedly of the Aztec mold. It is some 6 inches in diameter. The head is sandstone and is so cut as to rest upon a flat base in place of shoulders. Upon the bottom of this base are cut representations of the rising sun, the moon, a human figure in the attitude of worship, a fish, and other devices. Mr. Ford should by all means report this case to the Smithsonian. Of course he should, yeah. That's what you do when you find stuff. You better let them know. Illinois, skeleton of a prehistoric giant warriors unearthed in field near Carthage. Again, these names, as that guy stated before, the older and more prominent wonder of the world is Cairo, Illinois, not Cairo, Egypt. There has been discovered on a farm near the city a mound containing the skeletons of several prehistoric people. Mr. Felt was plowing in a field when he ran across a large stone that, being upon removed, revealed the cavity of a mound that had long been obliterated. The skeletons lay in all conceivable positions, but gave evidence that the bodies had been those of warriors that had fallen in battle. It is believed that the farm is the site of an ancient battlefield. The skeletons are of an unusual size, and the teeth in the skulls are larger than those of an ordinary man. The authorities of Carthage College have received permission to explore the field, and the Reverend Stephen D. Plebb, a noted antiquarian, has been sent for to aid in the investigation. The county is full of mounds, so of course it is. Bones of giants in Illinois. Skeletons of 16 mound builders found at East St. Louis. Again, East St. Louis. That's the St. Louis in Illinois, across the river, and a part of the complex that we were discussing at the beginning of this episode. Human bones believed to have been those of 16 mound builders were found at 2nd and St. Clair Avenues, East St. Louis, by workmen who were digging an excavation for a warehouse. One skeleton was walled up in a stone tomb 8 feet high. When a heavy slab of rock was taken from the top, the skeleton, standing upright, could be seen within. It was that of a man, apparently 7 feet tall. An effort was made to remove the skeleton intact, but when other stones were removed, it fell to pieces. Buried under 7 feet of earth, near the base of this ancient tomb, were found the skeletons of 15 men, all above the normal height. They were seated in a circle about the tomb where their chieftain had been walled. Now, it's incredibly interesting. It doesn't give you too much of an idea of how deep this is, but remember, we were talking about they broke into that subterranean highway at a minimum of 140, 150 feet below the surface, right? So, this is a civilization probably built on top of that, on top of another. Maybe we're dealing with 2 or 3 in the same area. And what did? We tore it all down and built a city on top of that. 4 or 5 levels of civilization.
Fresh produce is the best produce. That's why at Kroger, we invest in local farmers to bring you the freshest seasonal picks.
Okay, so to finish off, oh man, I have more. I really want to get to one particular thing here, so we're going to talk about the Piazza bird. I don't think Cootie Mail's in the channel anymore. Probably just popped in to say hi, but he's done a video on this before. Aztec, yeah, Aztec in quotations, of course. So maybe you are still here. If you are still here, you'll enjoy this one. He did a video a while ago on the Piazza bird, and I had some really old articles from years ago, and one of the oldest I could find is very interesting, and then I'll read a few newer ones that kind of correlate my opinions of them, and we'll probably call it there. I wanted to do this one too. All right, since we're talking about giants, we'll do this one. Then we'll get into the Piazza bird. Hope everyone's enjoying it. 146 people in chat. Thank you for joining me. Welcome. He's still here. Beautiful. Kudime, I'm going to get into an article here that I think you'll really like. It correlates and makes some cool kind of dragon correlations. They find the cave of the Piazza bird, and it's very interesting. This is from Walla Walla. I think this is from early 1900s, 1905, 1910, somewhere in that region. Unearthed giant skeletons. Illinois mound rich in relics of prehistoric days. Some proved to be 8 feet long. Diggers believe they have found an ancient burying ground, Quincy, Illinois. Excavations now going on the hilltop farm of Miss M. Crabtree, 8 miles from Mount Sterling, Brown County, are revealing a large number of prehistoric relics. The diggers are at work upon a mound. With the first day's work, the mound began to yield traces of handiwork of past ages and the bones of those who had rotted, and others immediately joined in the search still going on. Thus far, several skeletons, by actual measurement 8 feet long, and several pieces of remarkable pottery, beads, and curious implements have been taken out. The bones crumble badly almost as soon as they are taken in open air. They are so numerous that it is believed a prehistoric burying ground has been found, greater in extent and more perfectly preserved than any yet discovered. Under the bones of each of the ancient dead were found pieces of pottery, beneath the fragments of the skulls of some of them vases, the largest of which easily hold 2 gallons. Underneath one skeleton was a curious bowl, in the center of which was the figure of a king seated upon a log, and it is thought that these bones may be those of a great leader of the race that once ruled this portion of the continent. Strangest of all, the articles found with the bones were implements that are apparently made of bamboo, some of them evidently shaped for purposes of weaving. Vast quantities of beads were found in the mound of a strange material, almost white, and possibly made from the best potter's clay. 40 of larger pieces found in the mound were taken to Cooperstown, where they are now temporarily in the possession of H.C. Wren, postmaster. Others will be taken there to be kept until their final disposition is decided. One of the pieces is a shell-shaped dish with a wolf's head, the work on which leaves no doubt that it was carved, even the teeth of the wolf gleaming from it, and exquisitely done as some of the ivory carving of the Japanese, and some of those who have been the piece believed to be ivory. Big piece of ivory to carve that bowl, huh? All right, let's get into the Piazza bird story that may be new for a lot of you guys. I wanted to start off with this this poem. It's about Rock Island. Again, that island that we talked about in the beginning where they found the, quote, Egyptian Assyrian relics. Irie the white ever gazed upon the Mississippi's flood, when the Indian was sole monarch in this western solitude. This dreadful thing, bird, beast, or devil, so the olden legends say, cast its shadow over the valley on a sultry autumn day. Just above where the Missouri and the Mississippi blend, and the latter swerves to southward as the bluffs abruptly end. There the monster made its lodgings in a cave beneath the cliff, where the terror-stricken warrior first beheld it from his skiff. 'Twas a fearsome thing to look on, with its great ferocious head, and its mighty vice-like talons, sharp as spears and bloody red, while the vampire wings extended showed an alligator tail, and the body safe protected with a rugged coat of mail. All day perched upon the hilltop, it would gaze upon the wave, but retreated with the darkness to the cover of the cave. And infallible as nature, just as break and close of day, did it spread its mighty pinions and go forth in search of prey. Woe to any living creature that its eagle eye might scan, of it captured deer or bison, but its favorite food was man. It would seize its helpless victim and retire within the cave, and once grasped within those talons, all was powerless to save. I mean, I just love that. All right, we're going to get into an article from 1842. It's the oldest one I could find on this particular situation, and it's really valuable as it talks about material you can't find in any other articles about the quote Piazza bird, as I said in that little poem there. And it's a little hard to read here. This is a kind of a one of a kind article, so we kind of got to deal with this poor reproduction here. So bear with me because a lot of it's hard to read here on the side. The Piazza, again, this is from what did I say, 1840? 1842. An Indian tradition of Illinois. Towards the end of March of this something was induced to ramble among the bluffs below the mouth of the Illinois and above that of Piazza. My curiosity was particularly directed towards the examination of a cavern. Robin St. John, thank you so much. Appreciate the donations. Means a lot. Hope you're enjoying the material. 160 of you in chat. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here. Where was I? Directed towards the examination of a cavern, which in the above tradition is designated as one of these in which the bird used to carry its victims. I set out on my excursion accompanied by an experienced guide who carried a spade. The entrance of the cavern was exceedingly difficult to reach. At one point up to which I had scrambled, I found myself at a height of 150 feet on the perpendicular precipice of the rock, with scarcely so much room as to place my feet. Above me, the uninterrupted precipice covered high up, while the stream rolled below. After long and dangerous climbing, we reached the cavern, which is about 50 feet above the stream. With the assistance of a long pole, whereof we fixed one end of the projection or edge of the rock and pushed the other end into the entrance of the cavern, we succeeded in reaching it. Nothing can make deeper impression than the view of this cavern. In silent majesty rolls the Mississippi at your feet. High above our something, a cedar hung its branches over the cliff, on whose extremity a bald eagle was perched. No other noise or sigh was around us. The stillness of Sabbath reigned over the whole country. Of a sign of the smallest cloud was visited in the sky, not a breeze stirring. And smooth lay the Mississippi before us, and the landscape still wore the impress of wilderness as once when my eye of the white man had not surveyed it. The roof of the cavern was arched, and scarcely less than 25 feet high. The cavern itself revealed several irregular expansions and retractions, yet might, as far as I could estimate, be on the average from 25 to 35 feet wide. Its bottom was, as far as extended, covered with human bones. Skulls and bones lay about in the greatest imaginable confusion. To the depth I cannot decide. In each of the caverns we dug to the depth of 3 or 4 feet, and everywhere, again, I apologize, I can't read some of this, and everywhere nothing but bones. Here must be preserved the remains of thousands. Whom it is impossible to guess. Lewis, thank you. It's pronounced Pisa by the locals. Thank you. No part of the United States, not even the highlands of the Hudson, can contain the wild and romantic scenery of the bluffs on the Illinois. On one side of the Illinois, there rise frequently from the edge of the water perpendicular escarpments of several hundred feet. On the opposite side, generally there appears a prairie of several miles in circumference, till it is bordered by other bluffs similar to those of the stream. One of these chains of perpendicular escarpments commences at Alton, stretches with but little interruption many miles along the left banks of the Illinois. The traveler, when he descends the Mississippi towards Alton, lies between this place and something of the Illinois a narrow channel with which a foaming rock precipice illiates its waters into the Mississippi. This brook is called the Pisa. Pisa. The name is of Indian origin and signifies in the dialect of the Illini, man-devouring bird. Near to the mouth of this torrent there is cut at a height which no human art can reach in the face of the smooth and perpendicular rocky precipice, the colossal figure of a bird with extended wings. The bird represented by this figure is called the Indian Pisa, and therefore the brook received its name. The tradition of the Pisa is still among all Indian tribes of the upper Mississippi, and of those who inhabited the valley of the Illinois, it is related as follows. Many thousand months before the arrival of the pale faces, when the great Magolian and Mastodon, whose bones are now dug out, were still living in this country on the verdant prairies, there was a bird of such monstrous size that he could carry away with ease a deer in his talons. Having since that time tasted of human flesh, he would not hunt any further for anything else. He was as cunning as strong and used suddenly to dart on an Indian, carrying him in his talons to the caverns of a surrounding bluff, and there devour him. Hundreds of warriors attempted for many years to kill him, but could never succeed. Whole villages had been almost depopulated, and all the tribes of the Illini were seized with terror. At last, Onatoga, a chief, the sound of whose valor had reached even beyond the Great Lakes, went forth against the monster. He withdrew from his tribe, fasted for a whole month in a secluded retirement, and implored the Great Spirit, the ruler of life, that he might protect the lives of his children from the Pisa. On the last day of his fasting, the Great Spirit appeared to him in a dream, and bid him to select 20 of his warriors, each armed with a bow and a poisoned arrow, to conceal themselves at a designated spot. Near this spot, where they were to lie concealed, another warrior was to be freely and openly exposed as a sacrifice to the Pisa. And in the moment the Pisa was to pounce upon him, the hidden warrior was to pierce the bird with their arrows. When the chief awoke in the morning, he thanked the Great Spirit, returned to his tribe, and told his dream. Forthwith the warriors were selected and concealed in the designated spot for the sacrifice. Onatoga offered himself. He declared himself ready to die for his people. Freely and openly he exposed himself in view of the bluff, and soon perceived the Pisa perched on the cliff, espying his prey with greedy eyes. Onatoga raised his manly form to its full height, and firmly fixing his foot, began to chant the death hymn of the warriors. A moment after, the Pisa rose into the air, and with the lightning rapidly pounced upon the chief. But scarcely had he reached his prey, when each bow let fly, and each arrow penetrated into the Pisa's heart of life. The enormous bird shrieked out in wild and fearful screams that sounded far over the stream and expired. Onatoga was saved. No arrow, not even the Pisa's talons, had touched him. The Lord of Life, in admiration of Onatoga's high Sula deed, had held over him an invisible protecting shield. In commemoration of this event, the Pisa was sculptured in the rock. Thus runs the Indian tradition, whose truth, to be sure, cannot be vouched for, yet so much is certain that the figure of a stupendous bird cut in the rock is still visible to everyone, and that at a height to which no one can arrive. How and for what purpose it was made, others may decide, but to this very day no Indian rows by the place in his canoe without firing his rifle at the figure of the bird. The marks of the balls that struck against the rock are almost innumerable. Oh, yeah, I love that one. You can find a lot of stories like this, but you can't find anyone where they actually find a cave. full of thousands and thousands of human bones. Love that part. And again, it's one of the oldest articles you can find on it. After digging further into this story, found out that an ironclad, one of those ships that they designed to destroy all of these star forts all along the Mississippi, kind of the whole ruse of the Civil War, destroyed this drawing on the rocks and shot it with a cannon and broke it all to pieces, which is unfortunate. But you can find a lot of drawings of it online. But I talk often about all the different dragons I found through my years of doing this, and the kind of correlation between the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl dragon myths, and that America was known as the land of the drake, and the dragons, and these quote flying birds weren't just myth; that they held real belief among many of these ancient cultures here, and not only South America, Central America, but also North America. And I have a really great article from Canada that I'll get into here in hopefully the next 2 weeks. It's a long one, and it talks about the human race being forced underground by dragons, and that the cavernous worlds were inhabited by an ancient people because of dragons had taken over the land. But yeah, so I have one more about this. It correlates here. I just like the correlation here from the kind of an historical narrative. But yeah, it's called They Left a Record. The Pisa bird presented to this country centuries ago. I'll zoom in a little bit more. We'll finish this article and then we'll call it a day. Thanks everybody for being here. 180 of you in the chat. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the material in the series. Again, if you're new to my channel, thanks for joining me. Anybody up at this hour and tuning in, I greatly appreciate it for. Again, we've skipped over a lot of material, so if I have time, I'll get into kind of like a post-production video of some of the stuff I didn't get to. But yeah, so here we are. They left a record, the odd outlines of the animal graven on stone by Phoenicians who preceded the Spaniards, resemblance between the famous man-eater and the chimera of Cyprus and Asia Minor. So you've heard me talk about the Phoenicians again, the correlations with the quote runic and Punic, and these different scripts that often correlate, kind of tying nicely to this kind of pre-Babel, the Phoenician phonetic overlays to a singular language or singular script. And yeah, the Phoenicians are found. And who are the Phoenicians? They weren't necessarily a race, but a kind of secret society. In fact, many of the original, quote, secret societies of America were well aware of this fact. In fact, they called the Phoenicians the protectors of the Q. And they were the original, their original edict was they protected the mysteries of magnetism and the compass and many other things. You couldn't even become a captain of a ship. You couldn't even get a ship until you were elected into this secret society. So this mercantile trade class, you could correlate this with Atlantis. They were all part of this brethren. And when you reached the highest edict or order, you became a quote captain, and you were given a compass, and you were taught how a compass worked. You were taught astronomy and navigation, and these kind of, you were a king of your own vessel essentially, but part of this larger conglomerate. And that yeah, the Masons and Templars and so on and so forth, this kind of Phoenician concept again correlates to a a worldwide trade organization of sorts. But yeah, he state the state of Illinois possessed until within a few years the sole frail memorial in existence that the famous Phoenicians have visited this land in the most remote antiquity. There are many objects made by the Peruvians and Mexicans prior to the arrival of the Spaniards, which show traces of Phoenician inspiration. Now, I've talked a lot about who the Danites were. Again, Cootie Mayo, if he's still on the channel, he's got endless material on this. The Danites in America, how they tie in with the Mormons and who the Mormons were, previous to kind of this age of this reset concept that goes on here. There was a tribe in Central America called the Danzante, and they were also Phoenician. So, who were these Phoenician Danites? Again, if you want more information, I check out his work for sure. But yeah, so prior to the Spaniards, which show traces of Phoenician inspiration, yes. But there is nothing from Greenland to the Hermit of Cape Horn, which the wildest conjecture can attribute to the Venetians, save the Pisa bird. This remarkable object, says the Chicago Times, was sculptured on a bluff of the Mississippi near Alton and was destroyed either wholly or impartially by a superstitious Yankee commander of a tin. Okay, so there you go. It's the same story, but they call it a tin clad, who made it the target for his parrots and columbids, believing it to be what tradition declared a memorial of a devilish flying creature that carried off bisons and human beings with ease and devoured them in its bone-strewn lair. It is to be hoped that enough remains of this sculptured form to repay the investigation of some trained archaeologist, for there can be but little doubt that it was one of these polyform symbols which the Venetians left among the people whom they visited. Again, the dragon and the feathered serpent concept exists on all, with all cultures, on all lands. It belongs to the same order as the chimera of the Lydian and the Cyprus, and the Sphinx of Etruria, Greece, and Egypt, the winged, man-headed bull of Assyria, the human-headed harp of old Ireland, the griffins of Europe and Asia and northern Africa, the centaurs of the Greeks, and the ancient Picts, and the wyverns of the heraldry of northern Europe. It was, the archaeologist exclaims with bitter grief, our only polyform monster, our only one. It was in a perfect state of preservation, and a blundering brute of a naval officer made it a target for gunnery practice. Oh, inexplicable folly. Oh, immeritable loss. Fortunately, it has been thoroughly described by a gentleman who seems to have been perfectly contempt for the task and who understood its real character. Now, you get a lot of these very interesting drawings of the Pisa, and they do differ quite drastically. But one of the most striking ones is that it's a horned creature, and although it's been said to have a serpent head, it's also been said to have a human head. But it's been described as a winged creature with wings like a bat, scales like a serpent or fish, claws
Or like a
and
dragon.
horns, and long teeth. It just strikes me so much like a dragon. And
What else is it?
I've shared the nearly 200-foot long dragon skeleton found in a cave in Utah that was sold to the Smithsonian, and there are many other ones. Their heads have been found all over Colorado. There are tons of them. Winged reptiles, so on and so forth. The terrible lizard concept, often they were depicted with wings. The concept that we have of dinosaurs today, I would say, is more likely a kind of alliteration or a misrepresentation of ancient text. It was not painted on the rocks, and there's a drop of paint used in the construction. The bird, if the bird it was cut or chiseled or picked into the solid rock of the bluff. But how or by whom, I know not. Its body was that of a lion, its head and horns that of a deer, and its wings that of a bird. If there anything about this that looks like a horrible man-eater, I do not believe that such an animal ever existed. I deny its existence is incompatible with natural laws and assert that the Pisa bird was made by some race well acquainted with sculpture to commemorate the noble deeds of some great personages of ancient times. Now, whether or not you believe in these things or have studied these kind of overlapping symbols that exist all across the realm, that's why I started with the previous article from 1842, where they actually found its lair and explored a cave full of thousands of human bones. And the uh, ancient description varies quite a lot from some of the drawings. But yeah, um, definitely love the overlays there with the kind of Quetzalcoatl dragon motif. Um, and yeah, love the dragon stuff. Got just enough time to finish off with one really interesting article here. Important discoveries were made by a party of Galena, Illinois. Gentlemen on Monday, while exploring some of the Indian mounds supposed to be of prehistoric origin at the portage near that city, the remains of several adults were found embedded in a tomb, walled with baked clay, about 4 feet from the top of a mound, and some of the bones were in a fine state of preservation. The skulls, two of which were taken out whole, were in shape not unlike those of the chimpanzee. Really interesting. Um, as we get into Ohio, we're going to find more um, more material about these odd, long-armed, large-fingered, sloped head, odd-shaped jaws references to these kind of chimpanzee reference. And yeah, whether or not you want to attribute this anything to like the kind of idea of evolution and all of these Darwinian concepts, but I kind of lean towards again the more idea that we were dealing with all kinds of different types of animals and you know quote humanoids. Then we're told, lizard heads or whatever you want to call them. The bones of enormous size and length, proving they belonged in life to persons of gigantic stature. They lay in a bed of ashes and burnt clay, and with them were found a dozen or more bear claws, with holes drilled in the large end and sides exquisitely carved. Now, these bear claw necklaces, they extend through many cultures, and it's amazing how many you find. Even some of the Seminole tribes had bear claw necklaces, and yeah, it went all the way up into the Michigan tribes. The pictograph, according to local lore, was there before the Native. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, yeah. These stories of dragons, whether or not you believe them or not, they exist all across the realm. If you believe in dragons or not, it's totally up to you to take the information and make of it what you will. But I definitely lean towards the idea that there were flying lizards, dragons, whatever you want to call them, and man was warring with giant beasts in the sky, in the ground, on the ground, and in the water. Where was I? Large end was drilled through, the sides exquisitely carved, a half dozen large-sized, lustrous pearls, evidently used for beads, a copper bodkin, a copper axe, a copper utensil, all out 6 inches long, chisel shaped at one end and round at the other, a large-sized and beautifully carved piece of crockery, a flint spearhead, and several other articles never before unearthed in this locality, the mounds of which there are a large number in the vicinity, are located on the high bluff or bank of the Sinisinawa River, overlooking the Mississippi and the whole country for miles around. Yeah, when we get farther up into Ohio, we're going to find more mounds like this, where they find very, very unusual skeletons and, yeah, interesting war implements, interesting bear claw necklaces. Again, these large pearls and the quantity of pearls they find in some of these mounds is absolutely insane. And I've covered a lot of very odd skeletons through this whole series. Skeletons with wings, skeletons with horns, skeletons with one eye. Yeah, make of it what you will. But yeah, we're gonna wrap things up there. 2 hours in, a little over 2 hours in. Hope you enjoyed the material. Um, again, the hopping across the river here from St. Louis into St. Louis again, and the correlation with Rock Island and who these people were. Date for what? Date for that last article, 1838, 1878. Yeah, and again, kind of talking about these overlays here with Chicago being the Great White City and what some of these kind of theological societies were discussing in relation again with the idea of multiple layered lives and reincarnation and the Lemuria Atlantis overlays with the Chicago being the Great White City and um, yeah, all the different representations of America and all the different names it held through the ages and the correlation again with Little Egypt and Babylon and Canada and all of these things. So, but yeah, threw around a lot of weird and crazy ideas, and that's kind of what I like to do. Um, Inspire kind of different lines of thought from a perspective, from 1700s until present day. So, but yeah, um, appreciate all of you for being here. Yeah, the Great White Land. Um, yeah, love you guys. Um, what are we gonna do next? What are we gonna do next? Hmm. I think we're gonna do Ohio, but it might be Indiana. I might do a vote. I haven't done a vote in a while. Votes always seem to get a really good turnout, so stay tuned for that. Um, might do another little short video on some of these articles that I didn't get time to present today. But yeah, and I have another radium episode coming out in the next few days, so that's going to be a fun one. Stay tuned for that. We're going to connect radium with CERN, and the original inspiration for the Hadron Collider came from colliding radium elements and ether and all of these interesting experiments, and why one of the first statues installed at CERN was Madame Curie, the quote false identifier of radium. So that'll be a fun one. I've been working on that one for a while, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, look forward to a post, a vote, probably. Yeah, I think between
I feel like you have to watch this secret 瞄你兄妹，有咩？
I'm Wayne Herschel, pictographic symbologist and author of the Hidden Records Chronicles. What you're about to see is the secret that changes everything. I might be the first person to have discovered this secret of the pyramids and the origins of humankind. It has a very alien element, and this is where everything changed. I'm basically under attack, almost invisible on the internet. My website was obliterated recently. The time has come now where I need to ask you, the viewer, to be a part of this project. To help me with my Patreon account, the links will be at the end of this video. The ancients' bull worship and sun veneration obsession has a completely different meaning to what archaeologists are telling me. A sun and the bull of Taurus, it's a sun-like star that they venerated as the ancestor star in Taurus. That is where my work is different to everybody else's.
Wayne Herschel has dedicated his life to reviving the lost teachings of the Christ, ever since his near-death experience, and what he learned through it. A sense of responsibility to bring sacred knowledge forward persists, since it has the potential to unite humanity, and end all wars. A star with a beam of light once represented the origin record of the so-called Egyptian gods. It's the place to begin with, providing the biggest evidence. It also seems to be the same secret, adapted into what became the allegorical works of wisdom, of the historical Templars and Freemasons. Most controversially of all, it was encoded into the famous Key of Solomon cipher, that one of the most famous mystery fiction writers of all time, almost wrote a book about. But something stopped him. The ancient rituals predating the Christ were all about measuring the special position of an unconquered sun star, rising above the horizon on December 25th.
Have you ever wondered why a conical Yule tree, that the Norse decorated with a star on top of it, was adapted to celebrate the origins of the Christ, and a star associated with his birth? The well-known Urbi et Orbi might once have been linked to this ritual, watching Rome's monuments and 7 hills mirroring the heavens, while holding the Holy Grail, in this remembrance of celestial communion of all humanity's angelic human bloodline origins. It appears to be a lost Christian teaching that evolved from these hidden records. Records that show the identity of the 3 kings of Orion's belt that follow to find his special star. He stands within a ring device with a cosmic serpent dragon. It is time all humanity get to see how it celebrates human origins. The old beliefs of Mithraism and of the Romans with their Sol Invictus ritual are precisely what Wayne believes venerate the very same sun-like stars in Taurus, in his star map theory.
Wayne reenacts the secret hand symbols, and how to follow the Orion cosmic signpost, identifiable with its now proven swastika nebula, to find one of 3 special sun stars. 33 degrees of arc measurement in astronomy lead us to our human origin star. While Wayne was studying anomalies at the site he'd identified as Atlantis, on the eve of the Mayan calendar 2012 prophecy, this unique swastika Orion star map suddenly appeared right here at ground zero, indented into the ground. It was nothing less than a gentle reminder by the ancients that not only was his star map theory real, but they corrected the real future first contact date. The 2-hour documentary that follows tells all. This documentary will focus on the secret of the star area seen here. Wayne will prove the ancients celebrated the sacred bull of Taurus, and a prominent sun star, behind the bull's head. It was never our sun, that is to say, Earth's sun, that they obsessed in. Instead, it was the sun-like star system of their ancestors. It's the largest one shown here that was part of the ancient human origin trinity teaching. A solar trinity, so to speak. Taurus has a V formation as seen here. Simply place a line between the two brightest stars, and you get the inverted and correctly tilted Aleph symbol. This might be how the Apis bull of Taurus came to being. According to scholars, this tilted bull symbol became the tilted Aleph, then later became the Alpha symbol.
The Alpha symbol, coincidentally, has the same human code blueprint geometry Wayne found in 3 different ancient records, the very same shape that was used for the severely demonized deity called the Baphomet. Her secret will be revealed in the documentary.
The Alpha symbol has a celestial counterpart. The sacred feminine area of the heavens was seen as the Pleiades, with the Omega symbol as a heavenly gateway to it. This documentary will go into how that too evolved and how the Alpha and Omega message in prophecy decodes the unthinkable. These will apparently be the crucial words a cosmic messenger uses to identify himself in an actual event that we now have a date for. The Alpha Omega message basically reveals he is from the Taurus star gate. It will identify which 7 stars he then refers to with his right hand. We will explore the Yoni and Lingam connection in revealing the original Holy Grail ritual as it celebrates the as above, so below teaching. Which is why monuments were built on the ground to match this part of the sky. The sacred feminine, conveyed by a triangle pointing to Orion, and the sacred masculine, as the triangle pointing to the sacred feminine. The two originally, in ancient teachings from Atlantis, merged to create the teaching of the 6-pointed star.
The narrative then reveals, in ancient Europe, how the Orion long cross of the sky was another teaching mechanism of our human origins. For its part, what was special about Orion, for the Indus civilization, can only be seen in astronomy. A nebula pattern in the night sky reveals the swastika's origin. The oldest teaching tradition of the portal to the sacred feminine area comes in the form of a cosmic lion dragon. It carries Orion's belt on its back as its mouth opens as a conduit. A secret Bible star map shows the same star map teaching, with the cross as Orion, identifying Jacob's ladder and a portal. The oldest teaching mechanism of Orion, as a direction to follow, began in the Stone Age, the Karnaga squatting man. The symbol with its belt and star band that has a portal opening that usually includes variations of sun symbols. For Wayne, it is very similar to the H symbol he identified for the same lost teaching at a 12,000-year-old site in Turkey. But Orion is also found in the lost origin story of the 25th of December, Christmas teaching of the Three Kings. Few of us realize it is representative of a whole new human origin story that should be celebrated by all humanity. After all, we all share the same heavenly origin secret. Also to come into its own is the Solomon Key. Author Dan Brown is rumored to have dropped this historical mystery as the prospective subject for a book, one that reveals a very alien story and a Stargate dial-up address. Then just when you think things cannot get any more controversial, we explore the 4-kilometer wide alien message at Wayne Herschel's recently proven ancient site of Atlantis.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Probably the greatest questions one can ask in our lives. Our sun resides near Sirius in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. On the other side of the Orion constellation, which acts like a cosmic signpost, follow the alignment of the 3 stars in a row. This is where we find the Pleiades and some notable sun-like stars in Taurus that this documentary we will explore. The G-class sun-like stars are known in astronomy by the catalog names shown.
What Wayne Herschel coins the Sol-2 solar system seems next in line in importance. Sol-3 is lesser known. 4 completely separated ancient civilizations knew of it. All of these real sun-like stars, according to ancient records, seem to be associated as the place of our once amazing ancestor gods.
This collection of 7 major discoveries and at least 35 main discoveries is a secret that came at a price. It proves all humanity are the descendants of an alien arrival at Atlantis. Our ancestors invaded the earth. Neanderthal didn't stand a chance. This alien human origin secret is something all our leaders of the past have taken advantage of. If a soul doesn't know who it is and where it came from and where it's going, it is easily manipulated. It's easy to manipulate a soul when a human does not know how sacred they are and how equal they are to everyone else on the planet. What I've discovered can end all wars, bring peace and a golden era. While publishers and filmmakers are reviewing my work, I've decided to make a tell-all documentary that you see here. This way, there's no more guessing about what it all means. We have a very ancient alien human history, and while I was working at Atlantis, the unthinkable happened. An alien message appeared that was 3 miles wide, showing the star map that I've made quite well known now, and also showing a date of first contact. The ancients are returning.
It's time to look at the Dendara zodiac disk again. It has my ancient alien star map. The stars that I've identified in my star map theory are following the stars of Sirius, through Orion's belt, through the bullseye, to find the exoplanet and a sun star near the Pleiades. That's the Pleiades right over there. So knowing those stars, the Dendara disk shows Sirius with this little Horus and looks like a fish beneath it. That is the symbol for Sirius, scholars have agreed. Orion. There you can see his clothing makes that hourglass shape for the stars of Orion. That has been decoded by scholars. And the bull, very straightforward, a bull looking back at something very important. And we all know that behind the bull's back is the area of the Pleiades and these 3 sun-like stars. So what is the bull looking at on the Dendara disk? It needs more space. They seem to have taken an enlargement and they've put it right in the middle of the Dendara disk because it's so important. I always enlarge these areas when I'm showing the bull because they're just too small for the detail to be seen. It's a Genesis pictographic story that follows to explain the seeding of Earth with the people of the Tauri and arrival. It shows the first male, first female, right next to the star of the gods. There it is right there. So we're going to see this on the Dendara zodiac disk. But what they fill in next to it is what got scholars being anti that the leg itself was representative of the Pleiades. They put in another constellation, and we'll see what they put there. Right at this point here is the center of the sky above the north Polaris star, the pole star, where the axis of the Earth aligns with. So that got it all very confusing to put anything like the Pleiades next to that point. But it's because of the importance. There's the Dendara zodiac disk. Here's what we're looking at. Here's what they put as a constellation Bootes. The plow symbol is there as well, and next to the Pleiades symbol. Right there, you can see the detail. There's a a cleaver, and there's the plow. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, it's called the zodiac disc for a very simple reason. There are all the zodiac signs in order, going anti-clockwise from Taurus, Aries, Pisces. We'll go through that just now. Then we have the deacons, which are stars that rise on the horizon every 10 days, looking in the east, in Egypt. Not important right now. This is the part that's caused the problem, because we have a North Pole, we have a Northern Pole star area of Bootes, but what is the Pleiades in this area? What's it doing in this area if it is the Pleiades? And of course the extra part is what I think are the stars that the star shaft of the Great Pyramid align with, which are the same pyramids, 50 of them, that make the stars of these areas. That is my theory. Okay, there it is. There's the star map that I've made very well known. Follow the Pleiades, leg of the bull, to find the star of the gods. First male, first female. It's like an Adam and Eve story, Genesis of Egypt. Taweret, they called her. She's there. There's Taurus the bull looking back at his leg. There is Orion. There is Sirius. Okay, so we have this following. Oh, if that is Sirius, it might even be a binary star confirmed here, because they have two stars there. Follow through Orion's belt through to Taurus. He looks back on what's on the back of his area of the bull's neck, right? So there it is, right? He's looking at that area. And this is the area that they've enlarged and got everything confusing, putting it above the North Pole star area. But to fit on the zodiac disc was the most important Genesis theme tied in with this. This is why it's been added here, because it's part of an explanation of a Genesis theme. Just to recap, there's Taurus, Pleiades behind the bull's neck. Okay, he's looking back behind his back, all right? So he's looking at that leg constellation. It's like he's turning his head. And of course Orion is beneath it, Sirius. So those are all on the Dendara zodiac disc. Now looking at the stars of the North Pole area, the northern constellations, Bootes is known as the hippo, or the herdsman, or the plowman. But these multiple, let's call them legends, have got everything confused. The plow, or the cleaver, is another name for Ursa Major, or the Big Dipper. But it's the plow and the cleaver that are very important. You'll see how it looks like a plow, and the cleaver is the part out of the screen here. There is where the celestial pole aligns with. You can see that looks like a plow. We'll just confirm it for sure. And there is a cleaver as well. This Genesis deity called Taweret is either goddess of childbirth or bringing forth all children to the earth in colonization. We're going to review that very importantly. But she's trying to tell a story holding awkwardly two things over what I believe was the celestial pole, being the Big Dipper. Now that's something completely new as well. There is the center of the Dendara zodiac disc. The plow is in the middle. Okay, more detail. You see now that the leg of the bull is placed in the middle of it. So this is telling the story about the leg of the bull, and it coincidentally suits the stars that are over the North Pole axis. But there's more to Taweret. Taweret is also shown here with what I believe is the human DNA code tying to this leg of the bull, teaching about the Genesis story. She is teaching about Genesis. And Orion is shown here following his stars of his belt to this leg of the bull, bull crown, okay. 7 stars, okay, and a sun star behind the head. And it is the leg of the bull as the Pleiades. I've shown from one coffin lid here. Look at the star match. Another coffin lid just shows it generally, but it's the most important part of the heavens to the ancient Egyptians, spoken of as the 7 eternal stars. So there we have it. Okay, so looking now at the detail around that leg of the bull, it has 7 components in all. This is quite amazing. And Taurus looking back at itself, these names are for the 7 stars, in my opinion, of Taurus. We also have 2 other stars. We have a trinity, a solar trinity taking place here. Looking closer at this area as well, you'll see just now the detail above here. There's even more story down here. But yes, I'm sure it's the leg of the bull as the Pleiades. The man wears the bull crown, the female, which is also the constellation Virgo on the zodiac aspect, Shows the star on his staff with a bull above it and the bird on top of it, Horus, to found civilization. There are those three sun-like stars right there, in my opinion, and the bull looking back at his leg that has been severed. Our sun, I believe, is down here on the ecliptic because it's on the zodiac path with its position when viewed from the leg. In other words, viewing from the Pleiades, the sun is in the pincers of Scorpio. Now the cleave is pointing down to the Genesis deities down here, first male and first female.
Maybe. Hear me now? Put it back a little. All right.